as I'm going through stuff out there, to find things, I think about these. I see something, go, wow, that'd make a great show. Let's talk about that.
Isn't it
So
something how a lot of things jog? Now I'm seeing this honeycomb thing. Now I were they this the group that there was a song called "Stick Up." I don't think that's the honeycomb. This is this.
yes, the honeycomb is, want ads.
Oh, that is them.
That is them. Yeah, they were individually. They were with other acts, other Motown acts, and did background and stuff like that for these acts because it was a small community there at Motown, and they had Invictus, they had Hot Wax, they had a
Yeah.
few different labels. And when I was sent in 1971. Uh, I was sent to Detroit to shoot the. We got the cover for Honeycomb's album "Sweet Regrets" and the Flaming Embers, which was an amazing group. I don't know whether you've ever.
Westbound number 9.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. You'd be great on one of these game shows with music as a category, man. I mean, you just kill everybody.
They would say, "Here, there's the nerd on there."
That's right, but the nerd pays off. Yeah. So basically, I was sent to Detroit to shoot these two bands, and we used a photographer that was very connected to Motown and the acts, the different labels, and doing the different groups. And she was a really sweet gal. She picked me up at the airport, and for 2 days we shot. We sat with the Honeycomb, and then we sat with the Flaming Embers. And I wanted to just sort of this. This is the cover and back cover that we did there for the Honeycomb. They had a big single, one ads. They had a career like we talked about before that. They've had a few albums since then, and we ran into a real problem here.
Uh-oh.
And the real problem, if I never showed you the picture that I'm covering now, you'd never guess what it was. But on the cover, the girl on the left that you see was wearing a wig. And the wig was pulled back, and you could see the dark hair underneath in front there that I blew up. And that caused a real issue because there was no time to get checks and all that stuff. We did it, boom, it went off the press. And it came out like that. And there was a I mean, the company we work for had a lot of issues that were addressed to them because of that particular cover. But I, always liked One Ads and I liked their singing. So, I thought it was pretty cool. I didn't know that. I mean, none of us knew. What happened was there was an issue with time and retouching. And the whole issue there became, it slipped through the cracks, and so those kind of things happen. I mean, at Pacific Pioneer, we've had a few, we've had our own, but I thought that was interesting because it got in a lot of trouble
Oh, but
because that girl went nuts.
well, you hear about wardrobe malfunctions, hair
Yeah,
malfunctions.
yeah, that's what it was. I mean, there was really no budget. We were there. I mean, we had to go right from that. The end of the day, I met with the guys from Flaming Embers, awesome guys, just incredible. I love their music, and a lot of people had never heard of them, until they had that big hit single, and the guys were really great, and I had a chance to with both groups meet them and with the Flaming Embers actually in the studio while they were working on their album, finishing stuff up. So I got a chance to spend some time with them. But what I did here was I superimposed the pictures that you see on the back cover. That was the actual inside spread. But it didn't have enough room on this background to show that. So just imagine that shot, with no pictures there in the upper right-hand corner.
That's nice. That's
this
nice. Goes along with
incredible,
their
yeah,
name.
yeah, exactly. And this now, like the Honeycomb had the issue, this was a perfect example of my job at where I worked at Craig Brun was to design albums that needed to be printed on board. Okay, because that's the way it was kind of going. Everybody was trying to move to board, and the groups had control. So this was a gatefold album printed on board, and it was printed on board so that that white circle that you see behind me, when the record is closed, the cover is closed, that is the panel underneath on the next side over the back of it. So it looks like white and it looks like the sun, because the name of the album was Sunshine. And
That
so
is neat.
it was a needless, it became a huge project with very little sales. And that's kind of what was going on where we were working, because it was just kind of all destined to end up being on board, and you had to find a reason to justify that.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, again, again, the music had nothing to do with the music. This was more of a political thing. But we talked about that, about how the evolution of the paper wrap package was now going away, and board packaging was being done. And this was an example of spending an elaborate amount of money on a group that didn't sell as many as they would have sold, and it should have been on paper, is what the record companies say. I think it's great. It's a beautiful package. It really is. And that grand swope that we did, I mean, we spent the whole, what happened was we met with the Honeycomb first, and then met with these guys in the afternoon in the studio. And then the next afternoon we set stuff up, did the inside stuff, and then went out and did this grandiose shot. It was just a great time, and getting to meet them. And the interesting thing now, that you're probably asking yourself, what the hell has all this got to do with, the fifth dimension?
Oh,
And
wow. Oh, my.
okay, the common thread here, okay, is, and the reason, and maybe when you want to, post the show that's going to be listening on Saturday night, you may want to start out with one of these images from the fifth dimension, because that's who we're going to be talking about. But it's like, again, it's like, here's an idea, but here's backing up in time and seeing how we ended up getting this cover. I was always a fan of the fifth dimension, loved Marilyn McCoo. I mean, it was amazing, right? I mean, and I got a chance to meet her in the studio with a guy that we've talked about on the perimeters of Pacific Pioneer, a guy named Bones Howe.
I bet you it was Bones. I
Yeah,
bet you it was Bones. He did a lot of great production.
Bones is for Pacific Pioneer, and for us personally, he became like a Shep Gordon. He became a believer in what we were trying to do and the value that we could add, and the camaraderie, how easy it was to work with us. There were other artists doing covers, but a lot of them had a lot of egos, and they were hard to deal with, and the record companies hated them, and if they didn't hire them, and it was all this cirrus that was going on. And when we met Bones, I mean, I had heard his name, and in some pretty heavy duty, things that he had done, but I never had met him. And we get a call. What happened was, there were studio musicians, ready for this? There were studio musicians who had worked on the Honeycomb Sweet Regrets album, that also worked on the Flaming Embers album. Okay. And this is great. I mean, it's so incestuous, but it's like the Celestine prophecy, like we talked about before.
Yeah.
People coming in and out of your lives. Along with, a couple of musicians, word got back about this really creative, easy to work with design firm with this guy named Ernie Cefalu. Okay. And at that time, we were no longer with Craig Braun. So we were Pacific Pioneer, and Bones had been, it gets even crazier. Bones had been a friend, a fan of what we had done for Alice, what we had done for Captain Beyond. He didn't know who. He didn't know that Ernie Cefalu was part of Pacific Pioneer. And this was all explained to us later when we sat down and started talking, about how all these things years earlier reconnected to this man, Bones Howell, who was in real trouble with this album. Not from a music standpoint, because every song on this, and that's why it's going to be hard a little bit later to pick a hit that you want to hear, because every song on the album is a hit. So what do you do?
That's tough.
Yeah, it's like having 10 children at once, and you got to pick the one you love. But I mean, it's impossible. But Bones, it was like when I remember meeting him. We're in the studio, and it was like, have you ever met anybody that you felt like you knew before, and there was just this instant karma that emulated back and forth? It was like a religious experience.
Yeah.
Not to diminish either one, but when God comes into your life, it changes you. You become a
Yes.
different person. You become a better person. Okay. And that happened to me 23 years ago with my cancer, and cancer free, knock on wood. And, God came back into my life, and I don't go around putting my shoes on other people's feet. George Carlin used to say that all the time. He'd go, religion's like a comfortable pair of shoes. If they feel great on your feet, that's great, but don't try and put them on mine. And so I think that is a very personal thing. And that's how I felt about Bones. I mean, and we became friends. We did a bunch of work with Black Oak and all these different bands that Bones was doing. He was like a Richard Perry, or he was like a Bob Ezrin. He was different kinds of music, but just an incredible guy, and loved our work. And so the problem here was that they didn't have any, they had all this black and white photography. And this was a greatest hits album. And, so there wasn't really a lot of money for it. It was a paper wrap package, not a board package. They were really looking to save money on it. And I don't know what was going on between them. Maybe they were leaving the label. I don't know, what was going on, but it wasn't really. Look, this is the Fifth Dimension. This is a super group. You don't do a half-ass cover for them, especially a greatest hits. I mean, it's going to sell like crazy because every song on it is a hit. But the powers that be were the powers that were, and Bones Bones said, I'm glad that you're going to work with us on this project. Here's what we have, and he gave me a folder about this thick of all these pictures. And there was this one picture that you see on the back cover over here on this side that they were trying to use for the front cover, but it just wasn't, it just didn't have color. It didn't have anything. And so basically we had a very small budget. We had a very crazy deadline, which was not unusual for us. I mean, we could come in where wise men fear to tread. We would go in with all guns blazing, and whatever. Honest to God, this is the honest to God truth. I never remember missing a deadline. We extended a few deadlines because of the craziness or whatever, but we never missed a deadline. We never did. And to this day, I don't do that. I'd rather just back out of the project, if you see that it's crazy. But back in this day, when we were doing this, we were crazy. And I was so excited about meeting Bones Howe. I mean, that's a name that you remember. You hear it one time, you never forget it. And that's exactly what Bones was like. You meet him one time, you never forget it. He has a special place in my heart, along with all these other people that have helped us and believed in us, and that's really, it's easier to believe in yourself than it is to convince other people they should believe in you.
Yes, that's very true.
Especially these days, Joyce, everybody's a superstar. Everybody's the next best thing. It's a whole different world, So actually, we had a little time, not crazy time. So what we did was greatest hits on earth. I mean, come on, Barnum and Bailey, the circus. So we did a piece of line art, and then we just reproduced it four times in the corners, trying to make it look like a circus poster, right? With all the greatest hits on earth, the greatest show on earth. So it's sort of tying to that, put a lot of color in it, took the black and white photos, and Carl Ramsey did some tinting on them and made them with color. And then I created this logo that you see behind me.
That's nice. That
Isn't
really
it? Yeah,
stands
yeah.
out.
I mean, it was early on. I did that probably in about a day and a half. And the good news there is in those days you could just do black and white line art, and then you just put a tissue over the art, and you say, I want this area PMS, this, or 10% red, 14% blue, 30% green, and just call out the colors on an overlay. And then in the film separating piece of between leaving me, going to film separation, and then to printing, they would do that in that part of it. So, and we were really good at that because we had Paramount Home Video as a client, and every week they would come out with new releases, and we had to do this brochure, and it was all these different colors and doing stuff like that logo, and it was it became an easy way to get a lot of color and do it quickly, and that's how that is. And then, of course, the back cover, we just did a quick piece of line art. They didn't even want to print a color back cover. It had to be black and white because they were run separately, and then they could save money by running one in one color and the other one in color, and put the paper on the chipboard sleeve, and now you've got an album cover with very little cost. And I'm sure that the bean counters are going, hey, look, the cheaper we can do this, the more everybody's going to make, and the group will be happy. And who knows, maybe it was at the end of a contract going from one label to another, and they're owed, the label is owed stuff. I mean, this,
Yeah, good old business behind the scenes.
yes, exactly. And it's usually the bean counters that are going, hey, check this out. We can make a lot more money if we do it this way. So,
Yes.
that sort of gives way to any kind of sneaking into the wire. But I think that what we did here, and I'm very proud of this cover. I mean, it's not the most beautiful cover we did in the world,
But
but
it's catchy, Ernie. It says greatest hits on earth because you mentioned the circus.
yeah.
And the greatest hits on earth, boy, that really connects.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, that's what they were calling the album. And it was like, why would you show a picture like that on the back cover with them and say the greatest hits on earth without any kind of an excitement to it?
Yes.
When I hear greatest hits on earth, I want to be blown away. And when you look at the lineup on this album, everyone's a top hit. The group was amazing. I met Marilyn McCoo, who was
Lucky you.
my heartthrob. She is such a beautiful lady and just so thankful. I mean, she never knew me or anything, but you would thought, I was doing her a big favor. I mean, they wanted this to be, and I got the feeling, and I never found out the politics, never went beyond that, but I got a feeling and just had thought about it all this time that, there had to be some kind of political thing that was going on. Either there's disfavor, or there's a last thing that you have to give the label that you're leaving. I mean, there's always those, Joyce, you're in the music business. You've heard these horror stories about.
Oh yeah, they're forced to have to do certain projects that a lot of artists don't want to do, but they have to satisfy it contractually.
Yeah, well, John Fogerty is the perfect example of that. He was held to he owed 3 records, I think it was, to the label that he was leaving, or he could go a certain amount of time without recording. So what he did was he would get out of having to deliver 3, or maybe it was 1 that was left or whatever that could do, but he hated the label. So what he did was he built a studio at home, and he went every day and practiced, rehearsed, wrote songs, and he had like 2 or 3 albums worth of stuff by the time the thing was up. And he got out of that deal. I mean, the record labels were, if it wasn't the management that was getting you or a fellow group member, then it was the record label. And what really hurt was when all three were taking. And
Yeah, that's tough. Very
yeah,
tough and painful.
yeah,
And then the
absolutely.
music, it's the art suffers, which
Yes.
is the sad part about it.
Yeah, yeah. It's very funny how things have changed and how, um, you know, it's a different time now and the music's different. And, and I know, I guess it's just my love of the oldies, and I used to listen to my parents talk about how much they loved big band and swing and all that. That was their thing. And I didn't understand it, man. I was into rock and roll, I mean, this is like the rock and roll, I mean, and yeah, we had to sort of put up with Pat Boone, because that's the ones that your parents would put their approval to. But on the radios, we were listening to all the other music. I mean, it's so funny how if the more things change, the more they stay the same, I guess.
That is true. That is
Yeah,
very true.
it's it's such an amazing time that we live in, and I'm again, I say this all the time, but I'm so appreciative of such good neighbors and friends that you have that listen to your show and listen to the segment that I do, and I'm just really blown away. I mean, this Sha Na Na we were talking about earlier, this Sha Na Na thing that went through the roof. It's like Flo and Eddie and a few of these other ones that we've done that have really, done well. I mean, again, I don't know how it is on your end, but on my end, it's pretty amazing.
People
So
are amazed, at the backstory because a lot of times they'll think about the cover, but they'll never know, what happened to create that cover or those funny things that happened along the way. And you really bring it out. And
yeah,
I enjoyed the Sha Na Na talk too.
yeah, it was good, wasn't it? I mean,
Yes, it was.
I,
And then I started going through my. I found my Woodstock CD, and they had
oh yeah,
the bonus CD, and they were doing "Get a Job," and I'm like,
yeah,
oh,
yeah, yeah,
they
yeah.
were great.
And they were in a lot of ways they were one of the vehicles that music used to transcend from the 50s into the 60s.
Yeah.
Because the baby boomers lived it in the 50s. And then by the 60s, everything was changing. It was all acid rock and, San Francisco bands and, that the whole industry was moving. And there were people like Bob Dylan, like, Mary Travers, like a lot of these groups that were there to help the Peter, Paul, and Marys, that transition from beatniks to hippies. If you look at all these things that was going on, at the same time, you see the evolution of things changing. Change is a very hard thing to accept. It's great when you're young because you want things to change. You want to be able to say, I helped change that. I was
Yes.
part of that. But as you get older, you realize that change isn't so good because when change comes along, that means you could be out and somebody else is in.
That's a reality there, Ernie. Oh
Yeah.
my heavens. We are speaking with Ernie Cefalu, founder of Pacific Eye. Boy, we're having a great backstory today, talking all about the honeycomb. Then we went the flaming ember, and now we are talking about the fifth dimension. And
Yeah.
Ernie, the
And I,
songs are going to be tough.
I was really sort of in a dilemma as to where to start, and if I started with the fifth dimension stuff, then we'd have to back up, or would it be better to start with what was back then, like Honeycomb and some of the, and Flaming Embers, to lead up to the fifth dimension? Because the fact it could have been done either way, I guess, because I thought about it for a long time. I kept changing it. I'd look at it one way and go, well, then the story has to start here, and then we have to back up. Wouldn't it
Yeah.
be better to start back there and go forward? Some people, whatever's easiest. And I finally decided that it would be easier to start with the honeycomb, then the flaming embers, and then the fifth dimension, and the correlation between this album and Bones Howl,
Yeah.
and the rest of the rest of our lives still knowing each other and respecting each other and
Yes.
working together. Bones brought us in on a few projects, which was really great, and he was such a great person, and so I finally decided to start it this way. And then I was looking at it, and I put the other one on and the next one. And then I thought, but if I start with this one, if I start, it seemed to work better using the honeycomb, then the
Great
flaming
progression.
ember, then the fifth dimension, and then talk about how it all worked together. But the problem was the show. This today's show is about the fifth dimension, and they're going to look at an image that's the honeycomb, and it's like there's this. Oh man, what are we going to do? I mean, so. But anyway, I think that we'll have a good solution, maybe starting with that image and then going backwards. Starting as long as they see that the show is about the fifth dimension.
Yeah, either way, the
Yeah,
Blood Party family is very amenable. They are great.
Yeah, well, good. Yeah, I mean, I kind of liked it that way because then it's like, well, wait a minute. I thought we were going to talk about the fifth dimension. Now we're talking about Honeycomb. Oh, I remember Honeycomb. They had that hit single, want ads. Or I remember the girls, the different girls. They were involved with Phil Spector. They were involved with a lot of people, and then came together as the Honeycomb. But each one of them had a very soulful, history and background, church and stuff like that. And it's funny because Invictus was one of the other labels that was owned by Motown, along with Hot Wax and the others that they had with these different acts on them. They had an Invictus label that we did a lot of work for. And there was a girl named Ruth Copeland. I don't know whether you remember her or not, but she had a really good album. We did the cover, and then I never heard of her again. I mean, that's the beautiful thing about music is, it lasts forever. Unfortunately, the people that create it don't.
Yeah.
And it's people like you, Joyce, that help them live on, and and me too, in my own way, with the images that we've created. And I think that people like to know that stuff. I mean, especially in a time that we live in where everything is so right there on your phone. I mean, the world is so small. You've got it right here on your phone, and your phone
Hmm.
is right here. I remember we had a printer that had the first car phone. It was a ship to shore thing that looked like a walkie-talkie, and
I bet you was big.
and we were all like, "Wow, man, that's cool." That look at that. He's got a phone in his car, and it's like, it's like something out of the army.
I've seen some of those things, and now you laugh about it.
Yeah, oh
It is
sure.
so funny. We have 6 minutes, Ernie. I want to make sure I get those songs because I love your choices.
Well, I again, this album has everything to do with hit singles. So there isn't like a bad song on the album. But
Definitely.
as I think about it, to me, up and away. Burton would really come down on me for this because he always blames me for going for the low hanging fruit. But in this case, there is no thing other than the low hanging fruit. So up away. I think that "Let the Sunshine In," which is another song that I love so much for them. Um, I think that I think for me, this album, and it's what we need more today, is "Together Let's Find Love."